All right. So PAS Summit is from October 31st to November 3rd in Seattle. And if you were to attend all-in-one bundle, that's pre-con plus a 3-day regular events, it's $28.95. If you don't just need to attend those 3 days, not include the pre-cons, you can use our discount code VC15QVS7 to get $150 off. So if you register before July 23rd, the registration is $1,745, but after that, the price will go up. Of course, you may still use our discount code. These are the upcoming virtual group webinars, and Global Chinese in June 12th, and DBA Fundamentals in June 13th, and Women in Technology and Data Architect June 14th. But this is not a full list, and if you're interested, visit the PAS.org to get the rest of this month's virtual group webinars. And this is our future virtual group meetings. Of course, the most important one is the PAS Summit, and you can use this code as I said before. And then in July 29th, Cassandra will present career growth questions you are free to ask. In August, Rita Red will present 10 amazing things about Power BI you don't know. And in September, we are gonna plan an open forum that's called Real Life BI Problems and Solutions. We are looking for speakers. If you have some BI problems and you already have a solution, cool solution you would like to share with the rest of the chapter members, please send me an email. Tell me your title and a brief abstract. I'll include you in this webinar. That's in September. So I hope we can get as many speakers as we possibly could, and if one session is not, if we don't have enough time for one session, we can break it into 2 sessions. But I think this would be great for to help all those people who have similar problems and need a solution. And we have, besides the PAS local groups, we have many PAS virtual PAS virtual groups. It used to be called PAS virtual chapters. Now it's called groups, and you may join as many as you like. Of course, as always, you are more than welcome to join our chapter, which is Saturday Night SQL. The membership is completely free, and there's nothing to lose to join. So these are the upcoming SQL Saturdays. Just like the listed virtual group webinars, this is not a full list, and if you are interested, be sure to visit SQLSaturday.com to get more information or more sessions. They only listed all the way to June 10th. So this is how you connect with PAS. You can go visit the website. It's called PAS.org, or through Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. So this is how you ask questions during session. If you would like to interact directly with Steve, you may click the little hand. I'll unmute you, and so that you can speak directly with Steve. If you don't have a headset or you can't talk, you can also type your questions in the little chat window. I will read the question out so that everybody knows what your question is. All right, with that, I'll transfer the screen over to Steve. And thank you so much, Steve, for coming back and share your knowledge with us again. We really appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me. All right, let's see. So we're going to set up screen sharing here. Let's do that monitor. Let's see. Hopefully that'll start coming through. It says it's working on it.
Yeah, I can see your screen now.
Great. All right, so welcome everybody. Good to spend some Saturday evening time with learning some new stuff. And as Sarah kind of introed, this is a Reporting Services 2016 talk that I've given a few times. I did a talk actually 2 or 3 months ago for this virtual group as well specifically on the mobile reporting piece that I think a lot of people really liked. So yeah, this is kind of a little bit more general than that mobile session I already gave was, because this is kind of an overview of everything that's included now in SSRS 2016. So you know, we might have some time to go into some other things within this a little deeper, but I'll try my best to kind of cover all the bases, and then we can take it from there depending on how the questions go. So this is kind of the stuff that Sarah already went through with kind of my experience, and kind of the big thing I highlight is if you are in the Denver area, we do have a Power BI specific user group now. That's the Mile High Power BI user group that actually meets on the second Thursday of every month. So we just met actually this last Thursday for our June meeting, and then yeah, we do that every month. So it's a pretty good group of 15 to 20 people that come every month to this for Power BI specific information. So it's a pretty good community, and there you see below some of my social media contacts with LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So I am kind of tied into all of those. And here is the agenda that I've kind of put out for today, but a lot of it I'm saving time for demos, as you can see there in the middle of the agenda, but kind of wanted to level set with some of the new terms. Those of you that were in my mobile specific session, that's kind of a repeat along with some of the updates stuff as well from what I did in that session, but for everybody's knowledge and stuff, I'll present them here again. And then, like I said, go through a bunch of demos and all the new stuff that's in SSRS 2016. And then also at the end, talk a little bit about some future stuff, which actually is changing by the minute pretty much with any of this stuff with SQL Server as it is nowadays, which we can talk about there at the end. So some of the terms with how things have changed over the last with this release of 2016 from the previous releases. People are probably used to hearing the report manager as kind of being the main page that you would go to manage all your SSRS reports in the previous versions. Well, they decided to rename that to the Web Portal now. So it's no longer called the Report Manager, it's called the Web Portal. And that was just a way to rebrand it and make it a little bit more inclusive of more than just reports, as you'll see as we kind of go through what all is now involved and what kind of stuff you can put into SSRS that isn't necessarily reports. And the nice thing also about that is they did completely rewrite it from the ground up. It's all HTML5 compliant now, and it finally has custom branding support. So those of you who may have tried to roll out Report Manager and make it branded to your company and stuff like that know the pains of having to manually edit a lot of the HTML and other components within the previous versions of SSRS. But now with 2016, as you'll see, that custom branding is actually built right into the product now from the ground up, so that's really nice. And then some other terms that changed. The reports, the SSRS reports that have been around since the very beginning, back in 2002 when SSRS was first released, are the .rdl files that you may be familiar with. Those are still around and still can be built and used, but they're now called paginated reports, is kind of what the distinction is now. With those classic SSRS reports, you just call them paginated reports, because the idea being those reports are typically multi-page type reports that just keep having more and more pages of data, and that's kind of why they decided to call them paginated reports. And it also supports the reports that you might build with Report Builder as well, which is where the RDLX extension comes into play. If you've built reports with Report Builder, it has a little bit of a different setup, and there actually is an updated version of Report Builder for 2016, which we'll talk about as well in the demo section. Then there's mobile reports, which is kind of one of the newer ones that's available now. That I said, like I talked about, I did a session specifically on creating those mobile reports, but we'll kind of go through a little bit of a demo of that. And this is the reports that you may have heard of a company called DataZen previously. That was a standalone company that made these kind of reports, and Microsoft purchased that company a few years back now, and that's actually been rolled into the SSRS product, and the reports created for that are now called mobile reports. And you'll see how kind of those work and the differences between the mobile reports and Power BI and stuff like that as we go through it here as well. Then we have a new, completely new item that you can actually deploy to your SSRS 2016 servers called KPIs. Previously, you've been able to create KPIs within the DataZen reports, or now the mobile reports, and to a certain extent within the classic SSRS reports, you could build a KPI or a key performance indicator, which is usually the standard one is like the stoplight, where it's red, yellow, green type scenario based on your goals that you would set at the beginning of the year, or whatever, that kind of determines whether something is in good status or bad status. So you can now build these directly into the web portal, as we'll go through in a minute, and it's kind of an embedded piece of the DataZen technology embedded right into the web portal. It doesn't require you to bring up any separate editor. It's just built right into the web portal. So I'll show you that as well. And then last is the kind of the new one that's the newest one around now is Power BI, that I'm sure most of you have heard about. It's just a way to do self-service BI is how Microsoft's trying to sell it. So it's initially Report Builder was supposed to kind of fill that niche for people to be able to build their own reports and stuff using data they knew about, but it was still a little clunky as to how all that worked. So they looked at a different way to do it and build a new product from the ground up, which is Power BI. And it started out its life as a software as a service, which is what the SaaS is, if you've ever seen that term, is that it's a software as a service, which means it's hosted out on the internet, and that's where PowerBI.com comes into play, where you can actually create your reports locally using the Power BI desktop, which is a completely free tool, and then you would publish those out to PowerBI.com. But there's a lot more functionality than that. We'll get into a little bit of that as it kind of mentions. It's basically a full BI suite, because it allows you to do basic ETL functions. You can actually do modeling in it, and actually then build reports and dashboards within it. So a lot of functionality in that one tool, and then we'll show how that's now being integrated into SSRS 2016. So this slide is just kind of highlighting a lot of the updates. Not going to go through everything specifically on the slide, but just kind of some of the things I've already mentioned about all the new features that were added with SSRS 2016. But yeah, some of the ones I didn't necessarily go through right away, but are out there, are like these new for paginated reports for the existing SSRS reports, we get two new chart types, the tree map and the sunburst chart, which are kind of shown in these two pictures here as kind of a sample. But those of you who've done reports a lot, both of these report types are kind of available in a lot of reporting tools, including within the DataZen product had these two chart types. So that's the first new chart types that we've got added to SSRS, the classic paginated reports, in quite a few releases actually of SQL Server, so that's nice. And then there is now a new export functionality within SSRS. There is now the PowerPoint export. So they've kind of completed the whole Office suite now with exports. They added Word and Excel. Well, Excel's been there pretty much since the beginning. They added Word back in 2008 R2, I think I want to say, or 2012. I'm not sure which. And now they've added PowerPoint with 2016. So if you've been waiting for a PowerPoint export, it's finally here, but unfortunately you do have to upgrade up to 2016 to get it. And then the other big thing I like to highlight is that next point is about the way the printing used to work. And I'll show this when we're in the demo, but if you're familiar with how when you were in the report manager on the web, on what's now the web portal, when you click the print button, that was actually launching an ActiveX control in the background, which that technology has been deprecated now for years by Microsoft, and it was a technology that only ever worked within the Internet Explorer browsers. It never worked in any of the other third-party browsers. So if you ever wanted to do any printing on Chrome or Opera or any of the others, you couldn't. I mean, you'd have to export it out to a PDF and then print it, the PDF from there. So what they've done is the print button is still there. It's just that it no longer executes ActiveX. It now actually just creates the PDF because that's kind of a universal format that includes all your fonts and all your pictures and all that kind of stuff, and it keeps the placement very well. So they just standardized on using PDF then. So whatever your browser normally does with PDF files, that's what clicking that button will now do within those specific browsers. So that made it fully cross-browser, working across all the browsers. All right, so with that, we'll switch into actually showing all this wonderful new stuff. So the first thing I'll do, and I'll just refresh this, but as I mentioned, this is now the web portal that is the new interface now instead of report manager. It's got a pretty good new look to it. Things are organized a little differently, which is the first thing people notice that kind of throws them off. You'll notice it kind of has these sections here, tells you how many items. Might be a little hard to see, but if you look here, it's actually telling you the number of items that are within each of those folders. So in this case, folders has 4 items, KPIs has 3, mobile reports have 2, but it breaks all of the items out that are in each folder this same way. So if I drill into one of these subfolders, in this case there's only paginated reports in that subfolder being shown, so that's all that one has. But if I were to add an Excel file or any other of those file types, or add even a subfolder, it would again put that folder's name above this, and then put the Excel files in there, always in that same order. So that's always the first question I hear people ask is, can I change these buckets? Can I reorder them? Can I hide them? The answer to all of those, unfortunately, at this point in time is no. You're pretty much locked into all of these being shown. Now, if you apply security to each of the items that you can do, and you've always been able to do with SSRS, you can do security at a folder level, subfolder, or even individual items. Then the person that's accessing it, if they don't have access to that item, of course, then it would be hidden. But if you've given everybody open access, they would see everything kind of in this same format, where all these different items just kind of show up in these different little buckets. So that's probably a big set of questions that'll just head off right there, right at the beginning. But as you'll notice, there's KPIs that I mentioned is one of the new ones, and it shows up There's no way to change the shape or anything, but you can influence the color. The color is controlled by the KPI itself and the code or data that you use to access those KPIs. You'll notice that they have kind of a little, they have usually a measure of some kind, in this case a dollar amount for profit, and then they have this little line chart kind of showing progress of that profit number over a certain period of time. That I'll show you how you set all that stuff up. And then the background color then is controlled by the actual goal. So in this case, the goal for profit is much higher than 51.4 million. So it's in the red because we're not achieving the goal yet. And then you'll see mobile reports, which are, like I mentioned, the DataZen technology. And these actually show up, as you'll notice, as an actual live thumbnail almost of the report itself, which is kind of interesting that it gets that functionality, but you'll notice none of the others get that functionality. So that's something I'm hoping will be tweaked over time with updates to SSRS, but at least with the current shipping version of 2016, you just get these kind of thumbnail views of the actual mobile reports, not any of the other report types, unfortunately. Then we have our paginated reports that just all show up with the little icon and the name of the report, same as they do today pretty much within SSRS. And I will show you there's another view other than tiles. There is a list view as well if you don't like seeing all these pictures and graphics and stuff. Then there's Power BI desktop reports, which we'll get into in a second. That name is very specific for reasons I'll highlight when we get down to that point, but don't get too excited with this particular version as far as what it's showing with desktop reports, but I do have some good news in that department that we'll cover a little later as well. And then you'll notice there's two more buckets. These are the last two buckets that will ever show up. There's actually now an Excel workbooks section. So now you can actually upload Excel workbooks, Excel files into your SSRS server now. And they will actually be shown in the folders or wherever you decide to upload them for all of your users to actually see. So it's kind of a interesting way to actually be able to post some of that kind of stuff like Excel workbooks into this. But it's Excel workbooks are the only ones that show up specifically. So Word docs and PowerPoint slides or anything don't show up as their own groups either. They would actually show up in this resources group. So anything that's not one of these other file types shown above shows up in this resources section is what happens. So in this case, I just uploaded a PNG graphic file to put up there just to kind of show how that group shows up. But if you were to upload a text document or a Word document like I talked about, it would show up here in that resources section. So the thing I like to highlight that most people probably aren't necessarily thinking about now is that since you can upload pretty much any file types you want, why not put your documentation for your reports right out here? Just upload those into the appropriate folders for your reports, and they'll just show up in that resources section. So now you've actually got a place where you can keep the documentation for your reports with the actual reports themselves, which I think is kind of a cool way to set stuff up. But it's not as easy to use as you might be used to if you use SharePoint or SharePoint Online. You can't actually edit like a Word doc or even this Excel doc within the actual web portal here. All you're going to be able to do when you click on it is it's just going to try to download that file as an Excel file. So then you would be editing that file on your local machine, and if you wanted to get those updates back up to the report server, you would have to actually then re-upload that file and replace it on the server. So there's that little extra step you have to take to actually push it back out to the report server. There's no if you're used to SharePoint, you can usually click to open files like that, edit them, and then save them right back to the SharePoint server. You have to do that extra step of saving it locally to your machine and then actually uploading it again manually to the report server. So little extra steps, but at least it allows us to upload those file types now onto the server. So some other things I'll highlight, like I said, there is another view. So if you click the view now, I'll also highlight that to have the features I'm showing now with the view and some of the other stuff, you do have to have at least Service Pack 1 installed for 2016, because some of this stuff was added with Service Pack 1. So now you do, once you install Service Pack 1, get the choice between the tiles and list views. So the list view is kind of the classic view a lot of you might be used to from reporting services, where you kind of see everything listed out in a big table format. So that is still there. If you want to have that view back, you can just change that. And then there's also this option with visibility that you may be used to on the current version of SSRS that you may be using, where you can show and hide items. That's also something that was added with Service Pack. Well, may not have been added with Service Pack 1, but they changed the behavior, because the default behavior with the RTM version of reporting services was that show hidden items was turned on by default, so everybody would see all the hidden items. Now with Service Pack 1, it actually by default turns off show hidden items. So that's just kind of a trick that some of us use, because you can change any item to actually hide it from view on the system. So that's kind of something to keep in mind if you're looking at upgrading. So I kind of got used to the tiles view, so I'm going to switch back. And you kind of saw there where I clicked on something. So now there's these ellipses everywhere, and you saw that even in the list view as well. When you're want to manage stuff now, you just click those little 3 dots, and then there's a manage item usually on most of these. And once you click that manage item, that's what takes you into where you could set up the name of the folder, come in here to the security and change who has access to what and what roles, that kind of stuff, etc. is kind of all built into there. And that works on all these items. Each item has, with Service Pack 1, they added a bunch of different capabilities. So each of these different folder types or item types all have their own menu basically for this. So in this case, this is one of the, it's got add to favorites, which I'll go over in a second. That one doesn't have anything different, but if I go to like mobile reports, it now has edit in mobile report publisher shows up. There's a download function. If I go down here to the paginated reports, it has edit and report builder, view history snapshots. So they've added some nice contextual menus when you're doing this. The Power BI desktop reports, like I said, we'll get into that in a second, only really has download, just because it's not really what you expect Power BI wise. And then any of the resources in Excel workbooks, it's pretty much just download as the only option you have. So there's some nice functionality there. So then I kind of highlighted the favorites. You'll notice these little stars next to certain items. So you just come in to the item and set that add to favorites. And what that does then is there's a favorites menu up here at the top. And when you click on that, that's just showing just those items you've starred. So for your users, that when you have hundreds of reports, this is a nice way for you to go in and they can go in and mark what they want as their favorites. So each person has their own set of favorites that accesses the server, and they'll go to that page and then they'll see just those items. So and those items can be from within subfolders as well. So they don't have to be just the items that are on whatever main page. If you go into a subfolder and star something, like say I take this territory sales drill down, add that to favorites, and I go back to my favorites now, that territory sales drill down just shows up here in paginated reports. It doesn't even care that it's in a completely different subfolder than all the other items. It doesn't matter where it is on your server, just that they've marked it as a favorite. All right, so let me get back to home and we can start showing some of these things. All right, so I covered all that. Now we'll go into, actually, let's do some site setting stuff first. So the first thing is there's this new My Settings option off of the little gear icon. That setting is just for signing into Power BI. So if you want to actually get everything connected up with your online Power BI account, your powerbi.com account, you can just sign into this. There's just a simple sign-in process that just connects you right to, brings up the little pop-up of signing in with your login credentials to the powerbi.com, and then once you do that, it's all set up. You don't have to worry about setting it up again. And then there's my subscriptions, which I don't have any set up, I don't think, on this server, unless there's some demo stuff left over. It's still spinning, searching for subscriptions, but we can get into that in a second as well. With subscriptions, there's an interesting new setup for when you're doing stuff with some of the refreshing and stuff that actually adds subscriptions, which is nice. And then there's site settings. So if you do have the server admin privileges, you'll be able to go into the site settings. And from here, you can actually change what is the name of the server. I like to actually put the version number on there just so that I know when I'm logging into different servers what is the name of the server. And then there's the branding that I got into. So that second option there on the left is branding. In this particular case, you'll see that it's a specific package. They call it a brand package. So what I'll do is I'll kind of highlight what is a brand package. And you can click that Learn More link right there too. That shows you a lot more stuff on it. But on my local machine, I have a few of these, like my company, NCM. I set up some branding for it. I did kind of a quick one for PASS, actually, for PASS Summit last year. I set them up, but they're just these .zip files. I have 3 of them, that NCM, PASS, and an Xbox. But in those zip files, when you open them up, there's only 3 files, and that's all that's required. Actually, you can do it with 2 if you don't want to do a logo. You don't have to include a logo, so you could actually do it with 2 files. But the one file you must have is this metadata.xml. And again, that Learn More link actually will go through a lot more detail on all the stuff as part of this. So you don't have to remember all this stuff I'm going through. Zoom in a little bit. But that metadata file is pretty basic. It's just basically telling it what are those other 2 files, what is the name of this particular branding file. So you just have to type in what is that name. And then from there, there's the colors file and the logo file. And you could then name them whatever you want and actually even put them on different paths, as you'll notice, because there is a path option here. So you don't have to include them, I don't think, even in the zip file, but I haven't tried putting it like on a network location and see how that works. But typically from everything I've seen, people are just including it all together in a zip file because it's just easier to keep track of. So if you don't specify a path, it assumes it's in that same container. And then the same for a logo file. So a logo file can be of any size. You don't have to worry about what the resolution of the logo is or anything. It actually will shrink it down smartly. It won't, it won't distort it or anything. It'll actually do the appropriate shrinking to make it fit into the space at the top, which is really nice. It doesn't do weird things to your graphic. It's a really big one. Actually, the bigger the graphic, the better it looks from what I've found with the logos I've played with. But once you set up that file, those are really the only 3 settings you need to worry about in that file. And the colors.json then is the one that kind of does the most of the work of all the files. Let's see, yeah, there we go. So in the colors.json, I'm not going to be able to go through all this stuff because I haven't even figured out what all this stuff is yet. But you have your name, again, at the top that kind of matches up. And then from there, underneath this interface setting, which this is in a JSON formatted file or JavaScript object notation, has all these different color categories, and then you specify just the individual hex colors that you want to assign to each of them. So you can see there's quite a few, and the naming, unfortunately, is not as good as we would expect, because what the heck is a primary? What is a secondary? What are the alts? So a lot of these you kind of have to figure out on your own. I know some people have created some online tools that allow you, that kind of help you build this file out a little bit easier. So if you really are looking for that, then you can look for that online as well. Some of the easy ones that I've found out about that I know for sure what they are these KPI ones. So all these KPI ones come into play on just those KPI item type now that's been added to the web portal. This is how you control what is a good color, which is typically green, a bad color that's typically red, or neutral, which is yellow, and then a none category as well, which I'm not sure what 2C is, but I think that's like white or black, or it's probably some kind of off color that makes it so you can tell that's not there. And then from there, you've got data point colors. You specify, I think, up to a list of 10 or 20 of those that you can use, and those are used for how it will do different points within the different graphs types and stuff. Again, you've got good, bad, neutral, none for other items, and then some other places. So there are a lot of options. As far as I know, these are all the options. This theme file, color file I grabbed had all the options specified in it. So it's everything that's currently supported color-wise, but you do have to kind of figure out for yourself what those colors mean. And then, of course, the image file, as I mentioned. So once you have all that put together, you zip it up into a zip file, and then from here within this control panel, you just click the upload on there, and I'll go to that documents folder where those are and point to the zip file. So you can't point to the folder if you've extracted them. You actually do have to point to the actual zip file, and you just click open with the zip file, and it will reload with your new branding. So in this case, this was I did this actual presentation at the Past Summit last year, so I created a Past Summit themed one where I didn't do much. I kind of changed the highlighting colors here to a brighter red, and then changed some other colors that are on the home page. I added that blue to kind of match up with the blue in the logos and stuff like that. So I just did some minor tweaks on it just to make it look a little better for that particular logo and stuff like that. But you can go pretty crazy with the branding. In fact, there's a sample that Microsoft put out there that I always like to show because it is just so really bad. So it's this Xbox one. So if you know anything about Xbox, you know it has this really crazy green. So they kind of went really nuts with this theme and actually took that Xbox green and put it everywhere. So, and then they changed the background colors of all the items from white to black, and changed the text from black to white, etc. So kind of shows what you can do if you really want to play around. So that file is actually out there to download. It's out on the blog page actually. When they announced SSRS 2016, they actually put this out there as a sample you could download, so feel free to grab that one because it is a really good one for seeing maybe what not to do more than anything else, is what I like to say. But I'll switch back to, and then if you don't want one, so yeah, I could highlight this. If you don't want a theme at all and you just want to use the out of the box, you just click the remove, and it'll warn you that you're going to go back to the default, and that's the default with just the text up there at the top. So that's where in the general name setting, that's where that comes into play, is only really when you use the standard branding, the default branding package. And then if you ever, so let's say if I upload one, let me put the Microsoft one, actually I don't even know where I put the Microsoft one now, but we'll put the past one back on. And say you've put one up there, but then for some reason you lost that zip file, you can always click the download. Once the theme is applied, you can always click the download to actually get the zip file back. So it'll re-download the zip file with all the contents in it for you if you click that download link. So that's a good way to back it up if you need to, if you forget to and you lose the file somehow. And then these are some of just the standard items that have always been there with SSRS, the schedules, standard schedules, and the security, of course, for the site itself. So that's kind of the walkthrough of the main settings. Not a ton different. There is a new section here next to the gear that's called download now. This is where you can get all the latest links. So Previously, these in older versions like 2012 or 2014, you would be able to get to the report builder stuff through this, but it would usually give you the report builder off of your SSRS server. It would be one that you hosted the exe for whichever version of report builder you were locked in on. Now this actually just goes out to a web page out on Microsoft's site to download the latest version of all these tools. So if you are ever looking for a way to get to the downloads for all of the latest versions of all the SSRS tools, you can use that download link, and that gets you to for the mobile report publisher, the report builder, Power BI desktop, and Power BI mobile, which Power BI mobile, as you can imagine, is not going to actually be able to download the mobile versions, but it does give you the links to the different stores, to the Windows Store, the Apple App Store, and the Google Play Store to actually get them from those stores to put onto your devices. So you don't have to host the downloads anymore on your servers. They actually just link out to Microsoft's site to get them. All right, so that was kind of the admin and the basic layout of all that stuff. Now we can actually get into how you build some of these items. So like KPIs, as I mentioned, you do that right within the UI now. So you just click that manage item, and then you're just presented with a very simple editor right here within the web portal. It doesn't launch any kind of external thing at all, and then you can kind of just start tweaking around with it. There's all kinds of different value formats you can use for the actual number being shown. If you have used DataZen, you'd be familiar with kind of what's going on here as far as anytime you create a KPI within the server here, it's actually going to, I'm not going to do those updates, it's actually going to set up these values. So it's actually going to pre-populate just some dummy data into it, which is kind of something DataZen always does with the mobile reports. Even when you create a report, you start dragging visualizations and stuff onto the page, it automatically generates data in the back end just to kind of show how everything works. So I'm tied into that with this specific with this version of it, but you can always change these items to link to a specific data set field. The only warning with what that is so it is dynamic with the data set is it has to be an existing already deployed SSRS data set, so it's a very specific data set type. So if you've got already some reports that you've deployed out to your as paginated reports, you might already have a lot of this data that you want to set up KPIs for out there on the server, so you just have to point it to those data set fields. So in this case, if you select data set field, then it walks you through a little wizard to say, okay, which data set is it? You go to wherever your data sets are, you would choose the data set. And in this case, this particular data set has parameters, so I would have to provide it the actual parameter values. So that is one of the downsides to using if you have a data set that's actually parameterized, is you are going to have to know what those values are to actually be able to populate it properly. And this one, I don't even know what that data set is, so it's probably not going to come back valid, so I'm just going to cancel out of it. But once you set that as a data set field, that'll then be dynamic. So as that data set is refreshed, which is what I'll get into when we get finished with setting this up, is you can actually have it refresh on a regular basis then to show the updated values. But as you can see, for any KPI, you set the value, the goal, the status, which in this case, the status always has to be one of these three values. So if you are going to pull that from a data set, that data set is going to have to return just -1, 0, or 1 are the values it's going to need to return. Otherwise, the coloring and stuff won't work correctly. And the trend set, again, can be set from a data set trend. Or it's just a series of, in this case, semicolon separated values, and that's what's making the little chart here go up and down. As it goes from 3 to 8 to 5 to 4, and then back up from there, etc. So that's your data set would have to return in a similar format as well, a trend in that way. So that's kind of why I think some of this is a little limited, is I think you're more than likely going to have to build brand new SSRS data sets just to feed these KPIs, because the format of what they're expecting is a little bit unique to the KPI. But if you have that, then you're good to go. And then you can change the visualization. So you can have a regular bar chart, a line chart, kind of a squared off line chart, and then an area filled visualization. And you actually have none, so you can actually make it a blank visualization or just not show one as well. So all those options are available. The related content has two options right now. When it first came out in RTM, there was just the custom URL, I think was the only option as I recall. With Service Pack 1, they did add mobile report, so if you do want to link it to an existing mobile report that you have on your server already deployed, you would actually select that option and then you browse out to which mobile report you want to link it to. And when you do that, somebody clicks on that KPI instead of the KPI coming up big, like I'll show you here. If you click on the KPI itself, it comes up basically as a really large format of the exact same thing you saw. If you set that custom that item for related content to a mobile report, it'll actually launch to that, or in the case of a custom URL, will launch to whatever that URL is that you specify. So those are the options you have. You can add nice description, which shows up as a tooltip when you hover over it, and then you can choose whether to hide it and apply security, of course, to it. All right, so that's KPIs. That's pretty much all there is to that. Mobile reports, it's a kind of a unique beast, as I went through in the other session that I did a couple months ago for this group, that's out there for you to watch at your own leisure. Launches into this whole separate editor on its own that's called the SQL Server Mobile Report Publisher now. Previously it was called the DataZen Report Publisher or Report Editor, something like that. But yeah, from here you would just do what you need to do to change this actual DataZen mobile report to actually then make it what you want on the server to be different. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail of how to set up all this stuff within the report publisher, since that is covered in that other session, but you attach your data. In this case, all of the data is just all sample data, or simulated data as they call it. That's what all these different data sets are in here. They're all simulated. So you would replace each of these with an actual valid data set or an Excel file. Those are kind of your two choices within the mobile reports, is to use an existing SSRS data set as well, or you can use an Excel file to feed these. So that's kind of how all those options work. And then once it's ready to go, you can preview it within this tool, and then you can actually just save it right up to the report server as well. So that's kind of how Report Publisher works. It's got interactive capabilities, but it's not like Power BI in the sense that I'm clicking on things, but it's not doing anything. You have to kind of wire all that up yourself. That's not something that's done for you as it is with Power BI. So there is a little bit more manual work, but if you do like to do a little bit more of that tweaky kind of stuff, like what you would do with SSRS reports, then you might find this to be a better format to work in as well, then, because Power BI limits you on the amount of that kind of interaction stuff you can do, although every month it gets changed, so there's more and more stuff they add functionality wise that may end up making them pretty equal in the end. Paginated reports work the same as your server already has. In fact, a lot of these reports that I'll show you here that are on this particular server, I actually just pulled in from the actual SSRS 2008 sample reports, just to kind of show more than anything that it can render all those old reports just as well as it always has, even though it's the latest version of everything. It still will handle all your old reports. So those of you who've used the AdventureWorks sample data for many, many years will recognize that old AdventureWorks logo as the 2005, 2008 version of the AdventureWorks logo. So yeah, it just shows that this report was built in the much older versions of SSRS and still works just as well as it did in those older versions as well. So all the parameters show up just like they're used to, although now there is more flexibility with the parameter bar. With 2016, you can now actually decide to have up to like three columns of parameters now, and you actually choose what parameter goes where. It's no longer just a fill down type scenario where it normally goes down and then down or across, you know, whatever format it chooses to throw them in. You actually now, and designer, actually get to choose where each of the parameters go, and you can even leave blank space. So say if you wanted show all information to show up maybe over here next to report year and leave that gap there, you can do that now with 2016 when you're editing the actual paginated reports within Visual Studio and SSDT. So that's kind of nice that they at least added that functionality to the system. You'll notice the ribbon is kind of the same as it's always been. Some of the icons have changed a little bit, made it a little bit more modern with some of these, you know, page controls, a little bit different setup. The zoom stuff, as you saw me mess with earlier, still works exactly the same as it was. The little floppy disk is still there for save for some reason, even though nobody uses floppy disks anymore. But yeah, that's still out there with all the formats that have always been there, and the new guy being PowerPoint is now added directly on there, so you can save directly to PowerPoint, which is nice. And then that print button I mentioned is now this little print icon, and when you click that, depending on what browser you're in, it's going to behave a little differently because each browser handles PDFs a little differently. In this case, with IE, it actually kind of brings up some dialogues as far as how you want to open it. And on this particular VM, I have no Adobe Acrobat or anything installed, so its default PDF viewer is actually Chrome, ironically enough. So it will just bring it up in Chrome and show me that particular report within that PDF inside of Chrome. And then in this case, because Chrome's default behavior for a PDF is to send it to a printer, it's now going to try to load up its print dialog within Chrome to actually print it off, but it should show a preview here in a second as well once it figures out what it's doing there. Now it's actually showing that preview of the PDF that would be printed if you wanted to print it, or you can just save it. All right, so paginated didn't change, all works the same. I'll skip over Power BI just for a second, and then because I'm sure a lot of people, I did show this before, when you click on the Excel or the resources, it is going to bring up this download option. And you'll notice when I click on the Power BI, it does also kind of the same thing where it's like, do you want to open it or save it? The only reason I'm getting the open is because I've actually already got Power BI desktop loaded on this machine. So when I click the open, it's smart enough because it's been registered as a extension within my computer to actually open up Power BI desktop. If you don't have Power BI desktop currently installed on the computer you're accessing your 2016 web portal from, then it would only prompt you for those download options, just like Excel and the resources. So this just opens Power BI desktop. As I said, don't get too excited about the way it currently is set up. You're actually uploading the PBIX files that you actually create within Power BI desktop to the actual report server. So it's just like the Excel files, as I was mentioning. You're opening a saved copy of that PBIX file on your local machine in Power BI desktop. If you want to edit it and then get that file back up to the report server, you have to again save it locally to a location you know about, and then go to the upload option within the report server and manually upload the file again to overwrite it on the server. So it's still got that round trip issue with that, at least with what is RTM today as far as what's available in the latest versions of 2016. As I said, I'll get into the other capabilities here in just a minute that are actually in beta as we stand right now. So those are the functions as they stand today within everything that SSRS can do with 2016 out of the box and with at least Service Pack 1 installed on your system. I didn't highlight there is a search bar too that actually is kind of nice, so you can actually filter by text on your server. For some reason it's not. I thought I was entering text, but it's interesting. It's not taking text for some reason. I'm typing, but it's not showing up. Let me try refreshing. There we go. So yeah, you can type in, like say, mobile and hit enter, and now it will only show me the items that have mobile in the name. So that's kind of nice if you want to actually filter down the list within the actual web portal. Now you can actually do it by a name search type setup. All right, so that is, other than highlighting, like I said, the old report builder is still around, as you noticed when I was on the little ellipses for an actual paginated report. That comes up as the option to edit in report builder. If you click that, it does bring up this little pop-up saying we're going to open it in report builder. If you don't have it, there's a link there to go and actually download it. Learn more about what Report Builder is. But then what it actually did do then is it did launch the mobile report, or the report builder, I should say, and then brought in that specific report with all the code that goes along with it. So it's report builder is pretty much the same as it's been. It got a slight overhaul to mainly handle the new parameter setup. So when you're actually editing the parameters now, like I said, you get to kind of control how the setup is, and I have to figure out how that works here. Let's see if we go to view and show parameters here. Now you get kind of this GUI report editor. For some reason it's not actually letting me edit. Oh, there we go. Now it's dragging them around. It's just kind of hard to see, but it does let you manually move these items around, at least a little bit. I think Builder is a little bit more locked down than SSDT. SSDT, as you can see, I'm able to flip the order, but I'm having trouble making it actually allow me to push them into a third column and change the spacing and stuff like that. It's probably Builder is still a little bit more set up on the flow type of scenario, so that's why some of that stuff isn't being allowed. But within SSDT, at least, SQL Server Data Tools, when you use it to edit a report, you can actually fully control where they go and how what order they're shown in, etc. But other than that, just got a little bit of a ribbon change to make the ribbon look a little bit more like the latest version of Office, just to try to make it a little bit more user-friendly. But other than that, it really didn't change a lot from what it was previously. So I'm going to exit out of that without saving anything. And we went over the mobile report publisher, which was the DataZen technology, and we kind of highlighted Power BI Desktop and what it does within this limited version at this point. So that covered, I think, all that stuff I wanted to. So I will switch back to the slides, and we can talk about some of the future stuff. So the first item that always comes up, what are they doing with making the Power BI integration a little bit tighter? Because as you saw, what you see right now within that particular version of 2016 is very limited, and just to be just the desktop files, basically being downloaded and re-uploaded to the server. we want something, of course, that's a little bit more like what you do when you go to PowerBI.com, where you actually can see the reports, interact with the reports, maybe even edit the reports. So I'll show you where actually that is. That's actually a little further along than it was when I first presented this. It's actually pretty close to actually being out there for full use by everybody soon. I had put on here also an item about maybe the mobile report publisher being integrated into some of the other development tools, just from a standpoint of, it's yet another tool that you would have to have installed on your machine if you were supporting both paginated reports and Power BI reports and SSRS reports. That means you got 3 different editing environments that you have to install and support on your machine. So would be nice to see some other options there, but I kind of understand they kind of also want to keep it separate, just like Report Builder is separate, because it does have kind of a separate audience. But maybe for those of us who are doing development across the whole spectrum of report types, maybe we could get the ability to do mobile reports within the actual SSDT tools instead of having to use a separate tool for that. Power BI and SharePoint integration is actually changing quite a bit. They've already published the web part for SharePoint Online, I believe, if I remember right. I'm not sure that the fully set up version of the Power BI integration into the on-premises SharePoint 2016 is there yet. I think they're still working on that kind of the same time they're working on the full Power BI integration I'll talk about in a second. And then we have, are they going to make Power BI Desktop, the actual standalone app, available for other platforms? You know, is it going to be out there for Mac or Linux? Or actually even just make a fully optimized web version that would then work on every platform? Don't know where the plans are for that. I just noticed that a while back the Mac OS version was actually on the Power BI ideas.powerbi.com is actually a website you can go to actually submit different things you'd like to see Power BI be able to do, and that was one of the items submitted quite a while ago, and they actually have moved it into working status, like they're actually working on it or at least evaluating it. So that could be interesting that they're actually going to build maybe that Power BI desktop tool for multiple platforms. We'll see. And then the other challenge Microsoft has is, if those of you who have used what were the predecessors to Power BI, there was Power Pivot, Power Query, Power View, Power Map, all of those quote-unquote Excel power tools that were all these separate add-ons that you could download and install for free into the older versions of Excel, have become baked in basically into Excel 2016 and renamed to a certain extent to fit in with those tools better. But they are still supposed to be backwards, you know, and forwards compatible to a certain extent with the existing Power BI. So I'm not sure how that's going to stand, because the weird thing at Microsoft was that since those add-ons exist in Excel, that is being developed by a completely different team than who's developing with Power BI itself. So Power BI itself falls within the SQL Server type organization of Microsoft, whereas Excel, of course, is in the Office area of Microsoft. So they're two completely different dev teams, and I'm not quite sure what kind of challenges you know, there's going to be keeping all those tools up to date across 2 different platforms over time. All right, so before I'll leave you guys with, here's what is really coming with the Power BI integration. So if you go out to and search for Power BI Report Server, this is now the official new name of what's going to be coming out as a fully released product, which currently it's still in preview. It is right now they've released a May preview that you can actually install on your own server. So I have this beta code actually running side by side with my existing. As you saw, I did all the demos here in this tab, and it's just pointing to localhost reports, the standard setup for reporting services. This one is on a different port, and it's actually even got a different virtual directory. It's just Power BI reports is how I set it up. But it's a really lightweight install. You go download, and then you tell it, you know, you want to install the Power BI report server preview, and then it goes out, pushes all the bits out there, and then launches a separate config tool. So if you're used to the reporting services config tool, which I'm sure most of you, if you've used reporting services, are very familiar with that config tool, this actually just creates a whole different version of it that's very specific to the Power BI setup, which I'm actually trying to find while I'm talking, and it's not so easy. Where did they hide it? I always forget where I think they put it as like reports. The report server configuration manager is where they hide it, but this one is the Power BI specific one. So when you launch that, it works the same as the SSRS one always has. It's just that now this is managing just that Power BI report server instance that you can, like I said, run side by side, or actually have it completely replace what's already out there. But once you do get it all set up and configured, you do get the experience we're all looking for. I have just one sample Power BI report out here that I created real quick, where it actually is Power BI that's actually running within your own on-premises report server, and it works just like Power BI does out on PowerBI.com, with a few caveats with this preview release. Right now it only supports running against, on the back end as far as data sources, you can only talk to analysis services cubes, both tabular and multidimensional, but that's all. You can't even connect to regular SQL Server database connections at this point in time with the preview. So you do have to only be able to use cubes to do the access for those Power BI reports. So something to keep in mind for that, but if you do want to play around with it, it is out there, free to download and actually play with. You will also notice, I'll minimize all my windows here, what it does is you also get a specific version of Power BI Desktop that is just for that report server setup, so it does not modify your existing Power BI Desktop file that you have downloaded, and that's because this one adds the functionality to actually do the save as to the actual report server. So that's why it's a little bit different. So it's not as up to date. It doesn't have all the newest features that are available in that current version, but once this all becomes a full product, they'll merge all that code together, and then when you download Power BI Desktop from PowerBI.com, it'll be the version that will support report server on your local on-premises and do all these functions. It's just that right now they're two separate versions because they are kind of in preview mode still at this point in time. So it looks exactly the same as the existing one, and you can actually connect to everything that's out there right now. But like I said, if you actually want to publish it out to your Power BI report server on your reporting services, you do have to make sure you're only using analysis services connections, and they have to be live connections. So when you're doing the analysis services setup to get data, you have to make sure this get connect live is selected for it. It will not work if you do import. So a lot of little caveats right now. If you're a little worried about all those caveats, I would hold off, because like I said, it is still in preview. So it's something that they will continue to update over time, but be assured that here within the next month to 90 days, I would say at this point, they will release a full version. They said once that comes out, they are planning to support all the data sources that Power BI supports today. So it should be fully functional at that point. And then you can actually host your own Power BI reports on your internal SSRS server. You don't have to use PowerBI.com anymore, but you will lose some functionality because you will not be able to do any of the sharing that you can do on PowerBI.com with groups. You won't be able to do the stuff with Cortana that you can do on the website, and you won't be able to do dashboards because the dashboard functionality is something specific to PowerBI.com. So you really are just deploying the Power BI reports to your server, not the ability to create any kind of dashboards. So that kind of throws some people off a little bit, but those are all things that you will only get with PowerBI.com at this point in time. And I think that covered it all. I'm sure there's tons of questions, which I could stick around for.
Yes. So Adams was asking, are there any updates with the report server database?
No, so actually with the report server database itself can actually be deployed to older versions of SQL Server still. That's kind of been a feature that's been supported for quite a few of the latest versions of reporting services. You could usually deploy it to just about any version of SQL Server, I think all the way back to maybe even 2008. So it doesn't require, for the database hosting at least, to be on a 2016 server. It can actually be on an older server. So if you're trying to save some money and you already have your SSRS set up, on separate servers, you could upgrade just your report servers up to 2016 and leave your backend database servers actually on older versions of SQL Server, because it does support installing that database out on older versions.
Wow, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Would that impact any, well, performance-wise, would that impact anything?
Well, I mean, I can't, yeah, it's going to depend on what that setup is in your environment, of course, as they always say. So I know there's like a bunch of newer features even that they're talking about with 2017 where it can like auto change query plans and all that kind of stuff. If you don't install on the latest, your report server database on the latest version, you're not going to get any of those kind of engine modifications and updates, of course, but it's not going to run any differently than any other database does on those older versions of SQL Server. Is basically how you put it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're not gaining. There's nothing magic built into the report server database being installed on SQL Server 2016 that would make it run 5 times faster, other than, I assume, probably you're putting it on a newer server anyway, so you get the benefit there.
Yeah. Frank is asking, is the mobile mobile report publisher available in SSRS 2016 by default?
So it's a separate download. So Microsoft has moved into this. All the tools now are completely separate. So if you've installed even SQL Server 2014, you'll notice that it no longer even installs SSMS. SSMS you actually have to go out and download separately and install. It's no longer even an option, because it used to be in the tools section of the install for the SQL Server, and now it's been completely stripped out. They just decided, since those tools update on a very frequent basis, they're just not even going to include them with the installers anymore. So yeah, anytime you're going to use the mobile report publisher, the report builder, Power BI desktop, any of those tools, they're all separate downloads out on Microsoft's site now.
Okay.
So anybody can download them and use them. It's just they're all free to download. It's just then, of course, the actual connection to then publish them out to your server would be where, you have to have the server set up and appropriately licensed in order for it to publish them, is kind of how they work it now.
Okay. Does mobile report publisher work with SSRS 2014 as well?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I know, yeah. I mean, as far as, I guess maybe the question should be, are they trying to figure out from what they access on the back end as far as what your reports access, or are they asking about as far as SSRS 2014 if it has the mobile report? Because in 2014, mobile reports don't exist as a type that SSRS understands, so you can't publish mobile reports to anything other than 2016. But as far as the data you can access on the back end, it's anything that SSRS supports with their SSRS report data sets, which, as far as I know, that goes back as well to at least 2008, if not farther, that it accesses data from. It doesn't like require the data to all be on a SQL Server 2016 server. The data for the reports can actually be on much older SQL servers.
Okay, Summer, I have unmuted you. Would you like to ask the questions directly?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for the presentation today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like to ask whether the 2016 version to allow because for matrix report, SSRS matrix report in the old version, when you want to see the sales amount and the sales quantity, like I want to see 2 years, 2015 and 2016, and it would list, so the column sequence, it would be like 2015 amount, 2015 quantity, then 2016 amount, 2016 quantity. But
Mm-hmm.
is there any feature that it could allow us as a developer to list 2015 amount, 2016 amount,
Mm-hmm.
then 2015 quantity, 2016 quantity?
Right.
Because sometimes the user would like to compare the amount
Sure.
and then compare the quantity. They want to show them side by side. I don't know
Right.
whether 2016 has this feature.
No, so they didn't change anything in the background of how the matrix or any of the other controls within SSRS work at all. The only thing, like I highlighted, was those two new chart types that they added within SSRS for the paginated reports. Other than that, they didn't unfortunately change any functionality within the tablets controls. So either the matrix or the regular table control did not change. So yeah, to do something like what you're thinking of would I had similar issues at a client I worked with, and the only way I found around it, unfortunately, was hard coding the actual columns instead of making it something where it was a dynamically expanding type scenario by year. I would actually have to fix format the actual columns and lock them down and say, okay, this is the 2015 amount column, and then the 2015 dollar column was further over past the other years, and then that meant every time a new year came, you have to manually re-edit the entire report to add a column in or switch the columns for the appropriate years, which is kind of a pain. But that was the only way yeah, that you could do that type of scenario where you have multiple amounts for each year and you want them to show up. You'd have to hard code it, mainly using like you could still do it in the matrix. It's a little bit more work, but if you just use the table control, it's usually a little bit easier to do that kind of hard coding. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not very dynamic. You would have to hard code it all.
Yeah. That's what I did. That's what I'm doing now. I just have to use
Yep.
Tableau report instead of the matrix.
Yep.
Everything has to be controlled by the query.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, you need the results to come back in the way you expect them. Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, stuff like that's not something that they've made SSRS. Even Power BI, to a certain extent, has some of the same problems, but you can have a little bit more control in Power BI now with their newer. They've enhanced the table controls with a preview version. So again, it's beta, so you probably don't want to play with it. But if you are looking at Power BI, it does have some more ways of actually, because you have a little bit more finer grain control over what gets pulled into each of the columns in Power BI. So some other options there, but unfortunately nothing in SSRS.
Okay, here's another one.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So June is asking how to do version control on Power BI reports.
Yes, yeah, the infamous yes, I know, I get that question all the time too. So yeah, currently there really isn't any kind of version control. What I have heard of some people suggesting for version control, which is kind of interesting, is doing stuff, maybe having your Power BI files hosted in a OneDrive account that has versioning built in, or some people, if you are distributing the PBIX files around, you're not using PowerBI.com to share your Power BI because you don't want to pay for it. Just perfectly allowed, if that's the way you want to share Power BI. You don't have to buy PowerBI.com licenses. You can actually just share the PBIX files, just like most people today share Excel files. But yeah, then you have a version control problem, same as the Excel files. So people put them in SharePoint sometimes because SharePoint does also have version control capabilities built in. At least it lets you know when somebody's checked it out and checked it back in, stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, there's no easy solution built right into the tool. I know it's something that's on the roadmap because I have heard it mentioned quite a bit about some kind of capability to, especially once we get into this, it's on the SSRS web server. It would be nice to be able to go in and actually lock down a specific report, which you could do with the security, I guess, to a certain extent within SSRS. But yeah, it'd be nice to have some kind of capability to say this report can't be changed at all. This report can be changed, but we want to keep 5 versions back, stuff like that. So no solution that's actually out there today, but it is something I know they're talking about. The problem is going to be, of course, that means all that stuff is getting stored in your report server database on your SQL server. So that's, going to up the storage requirements for that server by, whatever number, because you're keeping all these binary files stored within the server. So it gets kind of expensive.
Yeah, I heard, well, I know some organization use something called SVN to keep version.
Yep. That's subversion. Yeah. It's called subversion. Yep.
Yeah. So that probably can be another choice.
Yeah, I mean, any of the tools that coders use today, like TFS, Team Foundation Server, or even back to Visual Source Safe, which is the old Microsoft tool for doing source control. Any of those kind of tools, you can put any file you want into them. The problem being with Power BI files specifically, they're usually published up to PowerBI.com, and at that point you kind of lose control of the whole file at that point. Then anybody, if you allow them access, can edit that file and republish it out to the server, and you now no longer have the most up-to-date version. So that is a big challenge for a lot of places that they really haven't answered at this point in time.
Yeah. So Thomas was asking changes in SharePoint integration.
So yeah, for SSRS 2016 specifically, they did put out the new, or did they? I always get confused because I always have been trying to follow it from a Power BI perspective, but I think they did put out the updated web part that works the same as the old custom report viewer web part would work. If you ever use that to build your own .NET web apps, they did put that control out. Now that control, as far as I understand currently, I don't even know if it supports mobile reports. I think it only works with paginated. So they are working on a fully updated version of the, oh, and he's talking about, okay, I'm kind of off on a tangent, I'll come back. They are working on another control that will support the full Power BI stuff that might be installed on your report server, like I just demoed at the end, and the mobile reports and the KPIs and everything, and that's still in the pipeline. That's not something that's done. As far as SharePoint integrated mode itself, you can still do it with 2016, and as far as I know, it all works the same as it has. I'm not sure where that feature is going though, because it seems like Microsoft is focusing more and more on the SharePoint Online roadmap. So yeah, whether they're going to continue to support that feature past, which we now know there is going to be a SQL Server 2017 coming out, but I don't anticipate, of course, other than what we're seeing already with Power BI Report Server, anything else for reporting services in that new version.
Okay. Would you be able to share the slides, or somebody's asking about the slides?
Sure. I mean, there's not much to the slides, unfortunately. They're kind of what you saw, but yeah, I mean, I could send them to you if you guys have a place that you keep them on the virtual
Yeah.
page.
Yeah, we have a website that
Okay.
under resources we post all the slides shared by the speakers.
Okay. Yep, I can do that. I will send it to Sarah, and she will get it up on the site then.
Yeah, cool. So another question is that what's the difference between SSRS and Power BI report server?
Well, that's a kind of loaded question. I know most people ask the question, why would I do mobile reports when there's Power BI that is built from the ground up to support mobile reporting as well, on mobile platforms. So yeah, I mean, the whole challenge is, and the way I like to explain it, that I probably didn't get into a lot when I was doing the mobile, I did more in the mobile reports presentation I did earlier, is that the way that I look at mobile reports is if you've already built out a lot of SSRS data sets for your classic SSRS reports, then you can go down the mobile reports path right now and be up and running mobile if you can reuse those same data sets right away. So there are a few challenges there as far as like parameterized data sets and stuff and how those work within mobile reports, but you can make them work. It just takes a little bit more work. But yeah, for Power BI, if you're thinking about that route, the problem there is it cannot access those existing SSRS data sets. So you're basically starting from the ground up with all brand new reports for Power BI. So, that's kind of, where do you want to spend the money? Are you going to, completely scrap what you've done in SSRS if you got a bunch there and start over? Or are you going to try to, kind of bridge the gap by going to mobile reports right now and then go to, newer stuff done in Power BI later on? Those are kind of the different scenarios you could look at there, since mobile reports only work with the SSRS data sets. So it does kind of change how things work within that tool now.
Oh, so I have a good question. Before we start this webinar, I asked you about that report that the format changes
In Word, yeah.
in Word. Is there a way to fix that, or?
I don't have a ton of experience with the Word doing exports to Word. I know there have been updates to that particular export, I think even with 2014, so I'm sure whatever they did there, they did in 2016 as well, but unfortunately they haven't taken it back to 2012, because I know you were mentioning you're on 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing, and you were saying your particular report that you're having challenges with was you had a bunch of, or were they text boxes or just separate tables that you kind of pushed them all together because they access different data sets?
Oh, they're separate tables.
Okay, so they're like lots of tables of different things that you just smashed them together or whatever to make it look the way you wanted to, even though they're all different data sets on the back end.
Right.
And then when you do it in PDF, it looks fine.
Yeah, it looks fine in PDF, but when somebody download it in Word format, the column the one table, when they don't have any data, it'll be smaller than.
Oh, interesting. So it's actually shrinking it when it's empty, and that behavior is not happening in any of the other export formats. See, that might, I wonder if you didn't find something that's possibly a bug with that Word renderer, because that sounds to me like that's, yeah, definitely something that I don't know if you can actually even code around, other than adding code into the value of that particular box that's causing the issue to check for if the value that's coming into it is empty, to actually then maybe put a force a space in there or something to make it so that it keeps the box at the appropriate size, is the only thing I could think of. Because you can in SSRS go in and actually, you know, interrogate what is the value that would be put into there, and then actually change the value that you want it to show to actually, if it's empty, be the non-breaking. If you're familiar with web coding, you can do what's called a non-breaking space, which is basically a space, but you can't take it away, is kind of how, because web is the same way. When it doesn't see anything, it tends to take the space away because it doesn't want to use the bandwidth to transmit the space. But you can do a non-breaking space. If you look it up on the web for reporting services, it's a special control character you can do. So you could maybe do 1, 2, or 3 of those, whatever it takes, to actually make it so that that box, even if it has no value, you know, has that non-breaking space in it that maybe Word can actually see correctly. Then I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, Jennifer has a similar issue, but hers is like her report when renders, even it has data in it, it still shifts to the left. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the other thing to check is there's the settings on every single text box that drive me absolutely nuts in reporting services about whether it shrinks, auto shrinks, or auto grows, and you could turn those on and off. So you might want to just make sure that that's set appropriately on whichever boxes as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's shrink and grow properties on every single box within a table or matrix control in reporting services. So I always make sure, if I'm doing something where I need the, you know, columns precisely aligned all the way down, especially like in your case where you're using multiple separate table controls, I go and select the entire. You can't select the whole table and change that property, but you can select, and it gets really complicated because if there's headers and footers, you can't select all of the cells that have headers and footers, but if you select all the body cells, you should be able to set that property just across that entire section of cells as well. But yeah, there's shrink. I don't remember if it's called auto shrink or if it's just called shrink, but there's a property called one of those two, and the same for auto grow or grow, which is height. So I think if I remember right, it's one controls whether it gets bigger height-wise, and the other controls whether it gets bigger or smaller width-wise. So
yeah. Would you be able to take a couple more questions?
Sure.
I know it's over. Okay, Jennifer, I unmuted you if you want to ask your question.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Steve, for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the one is the same situation Sharon just talking about when I convert to Word document, and I set all the setting for auto grow.
Okay.
Because, but when I convert to Word document, the whole column shift to the left, but not all the columns, some columns.
Oh my gosh.
So I couldn't find the workaround and couldn't find how to fix that.
Right. Yeah, and it definitely sounds like, based on what both of you are saying, that it sounds like it could definitely be an issue with that Word export control that Microsoft hasn't caught or that they know about. So you probably want to search on the is it still connect.microsoft.com? I can't remember where you can put bug reports in for like SSRS. I think it's still in connect.microsoft.com. You can go in and actually submit a bug report or search existing ones and see if there's something out there on that Word export, because if it's not having the same behavior in the other ones, that to me kind of points to a coding issue with the Word one specifically, because they are all kind of independent and they all they all handle all those settings differently, unfortunately, because I know I battled many times with how it looked in Excel compared to how it exported a PDF, and yeah, it was always a nightmare because you could never simulate it correctly on your local development machine. You had to actually publish it to an actual report server and run it there to actually see how the web page would actually render it, because even the renderers that are built into Visual Studio when you're actually developing the reports are not the same code that are out on the actual website. It gets even worse because you have to test it. You of course do the initial testing on your local dev machine before you publish it. Then you have to upload everything and retest it again in all the formats on the web too. So.
Another issue is when on a report header, and I need like a ID from the data set. So, and I can refer to the data set ID column. So use a report item, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, but when I convert to Word document, and the ID is not changed, which means because of the report I set up as listing. So if I report, say, generate 100 page, so let's say the ID column from 1 to 100. So every page should be different ID, but when I convert to Word document, the ID just show 1. Every page is the same ID.
Wow.
You have that kind of issue?
No. Yeah, like I had mentioned, yeah, I kind of got out of doing a lot of SSRS reports before the Word export was an option. I guess thankfully it sounds like, based on the pain you guys are having. So I've not had a ton of experience making stuff work specifically with Word format, and based on what I'm hearing here, I don't think I want to, because it does sound like it's kind of a pain. So yeah, unfortunately I really can't speak to what that specific problem is because I actually haven't seen it. The only thing I can recommend, like it says, check the Connect Microsoft page, or search, just try to format a general Google search to maybe find if other people have hit the same pain points with Word. And now it probably got worse because now they added PowerPoint, so who knows, what breaks with PowerPoint in 2016. Do these same issues exist there, or a whole slew of new ones?
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry I couldn't really answer it, but hopefully I can point you in the right direction to maybe get some help elsewhere.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. I think we'll stop here. If anybody has additional questions, please email me. I'll forward to Steve. Maybe you can blog.
Yep,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Okay.
And I will send you the slides like we mentioned, and yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Steve, to share your knowledge on Saturday evening with us. That's really helpful. We learned quite a bit, and I'm sure this time, just like last time, you will receive many appreciation for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll see you next month. I will stop the recording, and the recording will be available by tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Bye.